Hi, I'm Rebecca. Welcome to my sewing room. This is Sew Be It. This week I am working on a quilting project, but it is not a regular quilting project, such as a quilt, which I've been doing a lot, or a table runner. I have the Beachcomber quilted jacket pattern. So I'll be making one of these. This is a get a sweatshirt and use the sweatshirt as your pattern, cut it out. And I will be doing that, but I will also be designing a hood for my jacket. And as you can see, this doesn't have a button placket, but I do want my jacket to close. So I will also be adding a button placket to the front of it. You can get this, or you can make this lined or unlined. And I'm planning to make it lined so that I don't have to worry about what color sweatshirts I find, because I am using a mostly purple fabric and I would probably want a purple sweatshirt, and I don't know that I can find that. I will go ahead and insert a little video of the fabric here because I got myself a Moda Fabric layer cake. It's the Georgia pattern. The theme of the color theme throughout every piece, except for just the cream through the white accent fabrics, is purple. So I would want that. As you can tell, the jacket is lined, or is bound with this one is actually homemade bias tape from the fabric that the creator used or made the jacket out of. But because I have a layer cake, I don't have long strips, or I don't have a big piece of fabric to cut long strips out of. So I went ahead and got some double fold bias tape, lavender color, because that will match my jacket. And yeah, that's what I decided to do. I'm hoping to, I do not have my sweatshirt yet, and I do not have my lining fabric. So I am hoping to find a lining fabric that's close to this, or even the dark purple in these flowers. I think both of those would be a really nice design feature. So this pattern requires a whole bunch of stars to be made, which is the quilt blocks that we're making for the quilting portion of this pattern. This is also, the creator of this pattern also did a video on YouTube. I found it just by searching Beachcomber quilted jacket, and her tutorial came up. This is not an actual booklet. It has like the outside booklet part, but then you get printed paper inside that tells you how to make this. This does say that you would need 30 fat-8ths of multicolor fabric, 7 1/4 yards of light fabric, a crew neck sweatshirt one size larger than you wear, and 2.5 yards of lining if desired. I have one layer cake, and according to all of the calculations I did, this should be enough fabric for this jacket. Plus I'll have the lining fabric once I get that for wherever I might need to fill in. Okay. It doesn't say what kind of star this is. It's just a star. So this says you need 24 of the small stars and 6 of the large stars. Her tutorial did say you could use an assortment of any number or size of the stars that you want that fits on your jacket. That's just what she liked for the variety of all the small stars. My fabrics aren't a ton of different variety, but I can still make a lot of different stars from it. So hers is very different. That's just too eclectic for me, for my style, which is why I went with a layer cake. I might have to go back and check out the tutorial to really understand the cutting of this, the amount of cutting I need, or just sit down and think about it. So I am going to go ahead and follow the idea of 24 small stars and 6 large stars. So I'm going to go ahead and work on my cutting. Once I get to assembly and cutting up my sweatshirts and showing all that to you, I'll be back. of my squares completed, as you see. So now it is time to cut apart both of the sweatshirts I got. This only actually takes one sweatshirt, but I got a second one because I want to add a hood and a front placket. And since I'll have extra, probably pockets as well. So let's go ahead and cut these apart at the seams. sweatshirt, and then I'll be back. Okay. I have them all cut apart. So now I'm going to say the first thing I need to do is take the front of the sweatshirt, which is this piece. And then I need to fold it in half and find the center and cut that down the center. There's my front two pieces. Now I need a piece that is as long as that, but I don't want to cut down the center, so I'm going to cut this open. This is my second one. I am going to cut a piece the entire length of the sweatshirt, this wide for the placket. Okay, and now I'm going to cut this down to 3 inches. Cut this down to 1.5 inches. Okay, these are my 2 placket pieces. So now I need to pin these right sides together to the 2 front pieces and sew them. I'm using a 1/2 inch seam allowance on this. And I'm gonna make it all kind of all one piece, but I want the extra space for the placket, for the buttons. So let's go. I'm now going to stitch the seam allowance to the placket. That I'm going to go ahead and do the other side. Okay, I technically should be making the hood, but I don't feel like it right now, so I'm gonna skip past making the hood. I do already have my neck measurements, but that's fine. I'm gonna skip past making the hood to a more fun part. Now that I have everything cut apart and my front plackets are on, now we get to figure out how all of the squares are going to be put on the pieces. I did go ahead already and lay out one of my front pieces, and I have it covered. I have all of the pieces on there the way that I want. I don't have them sewn together. I will show you on my other front piece how to actually do this, but I wanted to go ahead and do it and see how it worked before I showed you. Okay, as you can see, kind of see that this is the top, because this is a section that is rounded or is missing from the front. The rest of it, like here is the shoulder, here's the underarm. Some of it's underneath the fabric because I still have to sew all of this together. And when I do sew all of this together, it's going to shrink it a little bit. So hopefully the whole thing will still be covered. But this is my layout. I need to sew together rows and strips and then piece it together. So what I will do is sew these 4 squares together into one big square and then sew my 2 squares together. So I have this strip. I will then sew the bottom and the tops together in rows and then sew those together and add that on and then piece the sides on to get it all together. So let's go ahead and work on that. So my first plan is to get as much of this sewn together before I have to iron any of it. So like my side pieces, I'm going to sew those together. Up here, I'm going to get as much sewn together as I can. Alright, I'm gonna go iron. Okay, I've already ironed. I'm now going to stitch together the center section, and then I will, after I iron that, I will stitch on the sides. go on this, and I'm going to straighten up the sides because I know they're just a little touch off. Okay, don't mind my look. This is early in the morning and I just want to get started. So I finally have my first jacket front completely pieced together. It was a bit harder than I expected it to be because I have some janky spots that were covered when I laid it all out, but were not covered once I pieced it all together. And then I kind of had to work stuff in, but you'll see what I mean. Here is my first jacket piece. I am holding it on to the sweatshirt behind it, but it's kind of falling down. Okay, so there were a couple areas like this one up top where I was able to get this yellow piece in next to there, but the bottom, I kind of had to fold it and top stitch there. I had to do that for another piece here at the bottom, and there's another piece somewhere else, right up here, like in the underarm area, or yeah, in the arm area, the shoulder area. But that'll just add a little extra touch, I guess, of the patchwork factor. I did forget that before I can piece it all together, or before I can stitch it all together, I need to get my lining fabric cut out too for all of the pieces. So let me show you the lining fabric. Okay, so I wanted a purple fabric, obviously, to match the purple that's in all of my pieces. And this is what I found. It's not as dark as I had originally planned to have it because I wanted it to match the dark purple, but it's not bad. It is the only one that was a blue undertone, which is what this purple is, instead of a red, so it was less pink. It was more of a cool purple. So I have not washed this yet, but I haven't washed any of the fabric. So when I do finish it and throw it in the wash, it's all gonna shrink down and be a little puffy like it would be with a quilt. So I need to go ahead and cut my pieces out of this, and I will be using the sweatshirt pieces as a pattern, just like I would with a regular pattern. So I'm not going to show you how to do that, but that is my next step so that I can start pin basting my quilt pieces onto my sweatshirt so they're not sliding around to being all goofy. Okay, I have all of my lining cut out for the pieces that I have, which is the fronts, the backs, and the sleeves. But because I want to have a hood on here, and I'm hoping I have enough of my printed fabric to do the hood, but we'll see. I might have to get more. I need to go ahead and draft the pattern for my hood so that I can cut those pattern pieces and those lining pieces out. So let's go ahead and get that done. Okay, cool, you can see. So I went ahead and measured my head, and my original measurement from the back to the front was 16.5, but then you have to measure the back of your head and the top of your head, and this was 10 inches and this was 8 inches, so that's more than 16.5. So one of those measurements is off, but I just went with the bigger measurement to make sure that I have the space. And I drew out a square here that is 10 inches by 8 inches. I've kind of sketched in the hood so far, but that might have to change because I need to go ahead and do the neckline. So to do that, I actually have to trace the neckline of my pattern pieces. I'm going to start with the back piece here. Turn that around. And I need to line this corner up with the base of the hood that I drew upside down, so that this is going to be where the front meets each other, so that's where the hood also has to meet. And we just trace it. That way the hood is the correct shape and the correct length. Now let's do the front. And the front is lined up right where the back stopped. And That's a long neckline. That's okay. But that also means this needs to change. Go ahead and just draw a straight line up from the end of this. Yeah, I'll just keep this straight here. Okay, so my pattern piece, I need to go ahead and cut this out and then cut out 2 of these from my fabric and 2 of these from my lining, and then I'll be back. Here's the hood and the lining, both pieces there. So now I am going to show you how I pieced together the front of the other front panel of my jacket. And yeah, it's going to be the same way that I'm going to piece together the rest of the jacket. So let's go ahead and get this going. By following the pattern, you have 6 big squares, big quilt squares, and 24 small quilt squares. And if you want to deviate from the layout of the pattern, then you have to make more. And so I just made what the pattern called for, and then I fill in the rest. If you remember from seeing the first one, I had my big square at the top of the other side. So the pattern calls for the big square at the bottom of this one. So I'm going to start with that, and then I'm going to build on with the other 4 little squares and then fill it in. I think the purple and green are going to be the ones that I want to use for this. It's probably not the exact spot it's going to be, but we're going to fill the rest in and then we'll see. The regular squares that I like. I think that looks nice. I do want to overlap these a little bit so that hopefully I don't have the same issue as the last time. Oh yeah, these need to be overlapped a little bit too. Hopefully that'll be the configuration. So I'm gonna go ahead and sew this together and we'll see what we got. Okay, so it ended up almost the way I had it laid out. I needed to add a little bit more up at the top here, but now just about everything is covered and anything that's showing will be in the seam allowance. So the next step for this panel, and I'll do the same thing for all of them, is to get the lining laid out and then pin baste it. So I'll show you how I do that. Now that's smoothed out, let's get the top. The pin basting is done. It is now all ready to be quilted, but I'm going to quilt all of the pieces at the same time. So I'm going to go ahead and roll this up and set it aside with the other front piece. Still have the back, both of the sleeves, and the hood left to piece together and pin baste in that way. So once I'm done with that, I'll be back to show you what I need to do next. So the piecing took me forever, but it is finally done. I do want to let you know that at the beginning I had said I bought a layer cake and I was pretty sure that it would be enough fabric. It turned out that it wasn't enough fabric, so I had to go get more. I was able to get another layer cake of the exact same thing, so you won't even know. But I got through, what pieces did I make? I got through the front and both front pieces and the back piece. And then for the sleeves, I only had the squares that I had already made, and none of my scraps ended up being really big enough to piece together and do anything with until I got the other layer cake. So I'm pretty sure my directions, like with all of the calculations on how much fabric I had, said that that would be enough. And I think the issue is that my sweatshirt was bigger than the pattern makers. In her video, she looked like she was a bit smaller than me and wouldn't need as much fabric to cover her sweatshirt, so that could be it. So make sure you have extra fabric or can get more if you need it. I did end up, I think I told you, getting a size 2XL, which is 2 sizes larger than what I wear, because I wanted to make sure that my jacket was big enough to wear over something like this. And I've had issues with making jackets that just don't fit over my clothes, and that's been really frustrating. So I got it extra big, and so maybe she wasn't expecting anybody to have one that big. So make sure you have that fabric or you can get more. So now I am finally to the quilting part. I did go ahead and try out what I was going to do for the quilting on my hood pieces and on my jacket, one of my jacket front pieces. So I'll go ahead and show you the jacket front because the hood is my own creation and you'll see it in the review. Okay, so this is my right front here. All I did was stitch in the ditch between just about every piece. These two are so close together I didn't stitch here. And I didn't stitch on this seam either, but for the most part everything else is stitched. I did stitch all around the oh my gosh, all around the star, and I made sure to stitch around the square as well, but I did not do that to the little ones. I only stitched around the big squares. I figured these are 4.5 inches, so that should be enough quilting to make it all work out. And then once I did all of that, I stitched around the outside. And this is what the inside of it looks like. Once I got done with that, I went ahead and trimmed the excess off of the outside edges so that it all was the shape of the jacket front. So now I will show you with the other jacket front how I fold it, and hopefully I can get you a good angle. final part of quilting this is to do the outline. So I will be flipping it over to stitch along the outside, stopping as I go to take out the safety pins. Step for each piece is to trim the extra fabric along the outside. So we're going to go ahead and do that. There is my other front jacket piece. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and finish the back piece, the sleeves, and that might be it. Is the back of the jacket, the sleeves, and then I'll be back to show you how to put it together. I also think I am going to add pockets, because what kind of jacket doesn't have pockets? And I still have some sweatshirt material left over from the second sweatshirt I got to make the hood. So I'll show you how to do that too. So the next step before I get to put my jacket together is to make the pocket pattern and make the pockets. So I'm just going to actually use the outside of the paper as the side of the pocket. So then we want to come from up here, and I am using my phone to make sure it's big enough and roomy enough. I'm kind of just going to sketch out a pocket shape here. Okay, that outside line design is going to be my pocket pattern. So I'm going to use my sweatshirt pieces, and I'm going to use the lining pieces, and I'm going to flatline the sweatshirt and the lining pieces together. The fuzzy part of the sweatshirt will be the inside of the pocket. Okay. Here's the back piece. I do already have the pocket sewn onto the front and the back pieces. I kind of I did it on the front first. I laid the pockets out, and I got them like a centimeter above the bottom hem, and that ended up being almost exactly 2.5 inches below the armhole. So that's what I measured. The back is a little bit below that hem, but that's actually okay because I am reattaching, I'm planning on it, reattaching the sweatshirt hem on the bottom and on the sleeves to the jacket, so I have a cinch, so you won't see the pockets at all. Okay, so now that I do have them with the lining to the lining, so like right sides together, the soft part will be the inside of my pocket. Yes. So now the next step is to attach the front to the back at the shoulders and the side seams, sewing around the outside of the pocket. So I'm going to go ahead and pin it all together and then I'll show you. Okay, first shoulder seam, I am using my quilting clips instead of pins because it's not really thick, but it is kind of substantial. So this is one shoulder seam. I am just going to do a straight stitch. I am going to give myself the 5/8 inch seam allowance because I got a sweatshirt 2 sizes too big. I also changed to my walking foot for all of the construction now. the first panel. I've got a pocket. Yay! Okay, so excited. I'm gonna go ahead and do the other side, and then I will show you the next step. Okay, I had to unpick the side seam a little bit down. I did not unpick all the way, about 2 inches, 1.5 to 2 inches down the side seam, because I forgot these are not set in sleeves. So the next step is the sleeves, and to do that I need to attach the cap of the sleeve to the armhole end to end, and then the underarm sleeve, the underarm seam and the side seam are all supposed to be one continuous seam, which is why I unpicked it, so that when I do the underarm part of the sleeve, I can just connect it here and then it'll be right. So I'll show you how to do one of the sleeves. This would be much easier to do if the side seam was opened all the way, but that's fine. Okay, so I need to attach right sides together. Turn my sleeve this way. Let me trim this real quick. I'm gonna make sure everything is trimmed, and then I'll come back to show you. Got it all trimmed up now. So you go ahead, make sure your sleeves, or make sure your sleeve and your jacket are right sides together when you do this. I'm gonna do it this way. This will be easier. It'll be easier this way with it turned right side out. That way the sleeve can just wrap around the whole thing. Normally I would start with the center of the sleeve, but I didn't mark it, so I just have to go seam to seam. Something's off. We gotta figure it out. I think we got it. underarm and the rest of the side seam. That is how you attach the sleeves. Hopefully you do it before the bottom of the side seam, especially if you're adding pockets. So I'm gonna go ahead and attach the other one, and then I'll be back. Okay, next step is the hood. Now that everything's together, so I need to stitch the hood together with just a straight stitch. Trim this seam. I'm going to iron this seam open, and then I'll be back to show you how to attach it. So I just put it on and tried it on my head, and I'm really hoping it's not going to look goofy. It should all fit just fine. I'm not sure. I guess we'll find out. I also, let's see, I didn't mark the middle of my jacket to match up with the center seam, which I usually do, but it should all fit seam or edge to edge. So I'm going to go ahead and try that. now I need to trim that seam. Okay, now that I have the hood on, I am reusing my stretchy binding. So this is the bottom. I do have it cut at the one seam, and that's just going to go on the center. So I will be stitching this seam to seam on the bottom. I will be using a zigzag stitch. My jacket is not going to stretch, but just actually no, since the jacket's not going to stretch, I'm not going to. So I say right sides. There doesn't seem to be really a right or wrong side, except for the stitching that's still on here. So that's the wrong side. So right sides together. How much does it really need to be stretched to be put back on? Yeah, there's not a whole heck of a lot of extra stretching, but it is stretched. Now this just gives me some anchor points so I don't have to stretch the whole bottom of the jacket the entire way. We just want to stretch it as we sew. Going to be quite a bit of hand sewing on here because I'm not going to trim this seam. I am going to press it up and then I will hand stitch it down to the lining so that it is a nice flat jacket. I'm so excited about this. This is going to be such a fun jacket. I still have a lot of work to do though. So I need to put the other binding on the sleeves at the end of the sleeves. And then what do I need to do? I think then I need to start hand sewing because I need to flip this up. I'll probably trim off the quilted part, but I need to flip this up and stitch that inside, and then I'll probably end up doing the same thing with the sleeves. And then I have bias tape to cover all of the inside seams on my jacket, and that's all going to be hand stitched in so that it's not seen on the outside. I'm just going to stitch that to the lining, which is why I've been trimming the seams so that I can just easily bind it with the bias tape. And then the final touch will be bias tape up the outside, or up the side edge of the front and the hood all the way around, and I will be doing buttons and buttonholes, but I'll show you that once I get there. So when I come back, all of the seam binding will be done, and the binding on the outside will also be done. Okay, I am finally to the zipper, attaching the zipper. I did find this metal zipper with this nice little zipper pull. It's 24 inches long. I was planning on, I looked to find a purple that almost matched this trim purple, like one of those plastic ones, because I thought it would look really fun with this jacket. And the only purple that matched that was 12 inches long, so that's way too short. And then all the other purples were a dark. I didn't have that color in this jacket at all, so I went ahead and got this one instead. So now it is time to insert my zipper. Oh my gosh. So I added the placket to the center of the jacket, the front of the sweatshirt, to give myself extra space for the buttons. That lends itself to work well for my zipper. I will be putting this on, so it'll be right sides together with the teeth inward. The tape of the zipper will be the edge of the tape of the zipper will be right along the edge of the trim. I will stitch that close to the zipper with my zipper foot, and I'm going to do both sides. And then once that is done, I will flip the trim and the zipper inside and stitch that down. Hopefully it won't be too thick, but that will also finish the edge all the way around the hood as well. So that'll be one continuous stitch all the way around. So I'll go ahead and show you how I'm doing this. sew. Really well. You can't see this, I'll be okay. Now that the zipper is attached, I now want to turn the zipper tape and binding to the inside here and stitch it all the way around, including the hood. This is very thick. I'll be back with the final product. this jacket. It's really unique. How often do you see something like this out in the wild? Not very often. Even if you are at the sewing stores and the fabric stores and all that good stuff. Not very often you see something like this. This took quite a while because of all of the quilting that you have to do, and then on top of that you're making a garment. So you've got like 2 projects in one. This took me about a week and a half. It took me even longer to find the zipper because it wasn't in the area that had the one store that had all of the zippers. And for whatever reason, only like one store has coat zippers. So it took me a while to find that, but otherwise, the actual work altogether took me about a week and a half. I did have a few days where I only had an hour to 2 hours to work on it though, so that also contributed to the time factor. Is it perfect? No. For whatever reason, one day my machine was having issues and skipped quite a few stitches. There was a spot that I only did about 6 stitches on that I realized, ooh, that's not exactly right. I need to go about 1/8 of an inch more out, and I couldn't get those stitches out, so it's double stitched. There are some spots that didn't completely get covered in the seams. So I am learning quite a bit. I know I need to make a lot of extra pieces to cover the sweatshirt when I'm piecing this whole thing together. Don't hope that that seam is going to be enough to cover it, because that did not work out for me in some areas. It shouldn't be a problem. I'm not worried about it. I bound all of the inside seams as you saw on the reveal. That way none of it is going to fray when I wear or wash it. Technically those stitches for binding the seams should be invisible, but I kind of just was going and didn't pay that close attention to how visible these stitches were. It's easier to not get right up underneath that fabric. It's faster, and obviously I didn't do that. So if I was to take more time or go slower, it would be better. But either way, I really like it. I do like how that I have the whole thing bound now after I put the zipper on there. One thing with this zipper, the metal teeth, I'm not worried about it breaking, but it does have a hard time going up and down. It sticks a lot. I think it's just because it's a heavy duty zipper, so be aware of that when you're picking out a zipper if you are adding that alteration, since this pattern does not call for zippers and it does not call for cuffs at the sleeves and at the bottom. Obviously I did a lot of altering. I want to be able to tell you what square this is on the hood. I don't know. The inside of this is a pinwheel because I really liked the pinwheel, but I needed to add some more, so I just added some fabric on the outside. I don't know what that's called. I think that's all I have for you this week. I hope you liked my video. If you did, hit that like button for me. It lets YouTube know that you really enjoyed this. It also lets me know that you enjoy the videos that I'm making. If you want to make sure you don't miss any of my stuff, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me. And if you want to be notified every single time I post, hit that notification bell and YouTube will notify you every single time. Thank you for watching Rebecca's Sewing Room this week. This was So Be It.